It is my privilege to bring to you now Mr. Vaughn Schnoebelen in his paper, What is the, whoopsie change it, Respect the Power of Music.
What brings you up when you are feeling down? What helps you find a way to express deep emotions in a way you did not know was possible? What inexplicably gets stuck in your head? Music. Music is a soundtrack to our lives. Throughout the ages, man has utilized melodic sounds to woo a lover, mourn the passing of a loved one, release anger, and even to express deep joy. The enjoyment of music seems to be the most relatable and universal activity in human life. No matter what part of the world you're in, people will be composing, playing, and listening to music. However, music does not provide a physical good or tangible service beyond an outlet for the release of trapped emotion. What is music? Music is the act of composing sound into a structured and repeatable entity, and then playing those sounds for people to hear. Music is often used as a means to convey a message or idea. An example of music being used as a means of communicating a message is John Lennon's Imagine. In Imagine, John Lennon is sharing his beliefs on what a perfect world would consist of and why it is something that is both achievable and commendable. The nature of music seems to be that of artistic expression of human desire. This deep human need for musical expression could not be ignored by the authors of the books that are considered great. It may seem crazy when thinking about Justin Bieber's latest hit or pining away to Taylor Swift's latest love song that ancient philosophers and theologians centuries ago were writing about music. But they did. In 380 BC, Plato, in his Republic, recognized that there can be good and evil forms of music through his record of a discussion between Socrates and Glaucon. Then in 400 AD, St. Augustine delved into man's relationship to music in reference to God and the Church in his Confessions. Both Plato and St. Augustine believe that music has the capability to induce change in the minds, bodies, and souls of the people who participate in the music. Both of these men came from vastly different backgrounds, yet they come to the same conclusion. Both Augustine and Socrates believed that music was detrimental to the advancement of their beliefs. But that is not to say that music does not have the capacity to be used for good. Plato was a pagan that lived in ancient Greece, whereas St. Augustine was a devout Christian who lived during the time of the early church in the Catholic Roman Empire. Plato begins the Republic Book 3 with Socrates and Glaucon discussing the elements of Socrates' perfect city-state. Through this discourse, Socrates and Glaucon discussed what kind of music would be allowed to be played in the city they were building. Unlike Socrates, St. Augustine was not trying to construct a model for a perfect city. Rather, St. Augustine ruminates about what kind of music should be played within a church and the sort of music that believers should be consuming in everyday life. St. Augustine was concerned with how music was being used within the church. Augustine was a member of a sect within the church who believed that the over-beautification within the church would lead to sin. The location that music was used was of vast importance to both Socrates and St. Augustine. What about the music itself? Socrates was cognizant of music, of the power of music on people. So when he was making his perfect city, he made sure to limit the kind of music that was played, and those who listened to it. The people who were living in Socrates' city were not allowed to become musicians. While Socrates focuses on creating the perfect city-state, St. Augustine's focus is on the streamlining of the worship of God. What is meant by streamlining is that St. Augustine wants to remove any ability for the worshiper's mind to stray from thinking about the beauty of God toward thinking about the beauty of their singing. Now that the stage has been set, let us begin in earnest, starting with Plato's perfect city. In Plato's Republic Book 3, Socrates and Glaucon are conversing upon the importance of what should be allowed in the making of a perfect city-state. It was important for the rulers of the city to not be allowed to possess the things that are most commonly associated with personal happiness. For the goal of the city is to make the collective happy, not a specific group. The people guarding Socrates City were not to have any distraction, whether they be personal or from the outside. Finally, the tradesmen were not to make frivolous things, but only make those things that would advance the good of the city. During the conversation between Socrates and Vaughn, Socrates puts forth the idea that the perfect city-state would relegate people into certain roles in society based on birth, and the individuals would not have the ability to change their station, otherwise known as the caste system. In Socrates' perfect city-state, there are three stations: the producers, the auxiliary, and the guardians. The producers are the tradesmen and craftsmen, and farmers that make the economy of the city thrive. The auxiliary is the name of the station that supplies the city with its warriors who are in charge of the defense of the city. The auxiliary are also responsible for keeping the peace in the city, like the police and other public defenders. The guardians were to be chosen from the ranks of the auxiliary to be the leaders of the city. Socrates is adamant that the guardian's education in day-to-day life should be insulated from the frivolous things in life. This is in order for guardians to lead to the best of their abilities. Part of this insulating of the guardian was pruning the music that they would listen to. While Socrates did not see the musical arts as entirely evil or wrong, he did see them as an unnecessary inconvenience that could distract the guardians from leading the city, while also distracting the soldiers from their duties. However, as the dialogue progressed, Socrates' musical modes, made popular by the Greek philosopher Aristophanes of Tarentum, while there are 7 modes total, Socrates focused on 4: the Phrygian, Dorian, Ionian, and Lydian. In Socrates' mind, the perfect city would be a place of order and without strife. For in a perfect state, every person would know the responsibility and the place of every action. Knowing the place of music is critical to how Socrates built his perfect city. Socrates believed that for the improvement of the ideal city-state, that the only music that should be played should be those that promote the strengthening of character within those who listen. And Socrates believed those to be the Dorian and Phrygian modes. For Socrates states, quote, "But it would seem that you have left the Dorian and Phrygian. I don't know the musical modes," I said, "but leave us that mode that would fittingly imitate the utterances and accents of a brave man who's engaged in warfare or in enforced business, and who, when he has failed, whether meeting wounds or death or having fallen into some other mishap in all these conditions, confronts fortune with steadfast endurance and repels her strokes. Leave us these 2 modes, the enforced and the voluntary, that will best imitate the utterances of men failing or succeeding, the temperate, the brave, leave us these," end quote. However, the perfect city-state was not to produce musicians from within itself. Socrates believed that people who can do these things should be honored and sent along their way. Socrates made that clear when he said, quote, "If a man who was capable by his cunning of assuming every kind of shape and imitating all these things should arrive in our city, bring with himself the poems which he wished to exhibit, we should fall down and worship him as holy and wondrous and delightful creature, but should say to him that there is no man of that kind among us in our city, nor is it lawful for such a man to arise among us, and we should send him away to another city," end quote. Socrates' main reason for not wanting the people of his city to take part in music was because of the places in which music was most commonly played, and the action that music was associated with, those being beer halls and drunkenness. Socrates stated, quote, "But again, drunkenness is a thing most unbefitting guardians, and so is softness and sloth. What then are the soft and congenial modes? There are certain Ionian and also Lydian modes that are called lax. Will you make use of them for warriors? Not at all," end quote. Socrates believed that music could be used for the furthering of the goals of his city. For within the Dorian and Ionian mode, the music that is created can be used for the strengthening of the men, fortifying them with bravery and courage. A great example of the ability of music to foster emotion that affect us in positive ways is America the Beautiful. When a person who is born or lives in the United States listens to America the Beautiful, it creates a great sense of patriotism. However, Socrates also acknowledges the pitfalls that music can produce within a city. The way in which Socrates' city was constructed was a pivotal contributor to his views of music in society. During the construction of Socrates' city-state, the understanding of music and what its purpose within the city is critical to its health. For to have long-term prosperity of the city or country, the ethics and morals of the people who reside in that city must be kept to the highest of standards. Socrates believed that music had a profound role in the shaping of a people's morals and what they perceived as an ethical action. Socrates had an understanding that song or music is constructed through the use of three components, those being the words, the tune, and the rhythm. During Socrates' time, the content or words which made up the song was not a major concern. For the things that music was used to express was the epics of wars and the stories of the gods and heroes. However, Socrates did have concerns about the tune and the rhythm of music that was being played in the city. The tune of music is what constitutes a mode of music. Socrates is wary of music and the modes because of the impact it has on those who partake in it. These concerns center around the modes of music. The most common modes were the Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and Ionian modes. Socrates believed that each mode had a different effect on the people who listened to them. Socrates did not believe that the act of playing or partaking in music was inherently evil, but he did believe that the music people listened to changed the way they acted. For example, the Dorian mode, which is most used in jazz, blues, and funk music, is known for creating a sense of serenity and peace in people. An example of this mode of music is the song Mad World by Tears for Fears. The Phrygian mode is used to create a dark, tense sound and creates a sense of foreboding. And the Phrygian mode is used most often in jazz and metal because of its Spanish timbre. An example of the Phrygian mode in contemporary music is Time in a Bottle by Jim Croce. The Lydian is a mystical sounding mode. Lydian is used in jazz and rarely elsewhere. Some music in the Lydian mode include the bass line for the Police's song, Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, and Africa by Toto. Finally, the Ionian mode is bright and happy. The Ionian is found within most genres of music. The Ionian is what we call major. Socrates, when talking with Glaucon, shows his belief in the power of music when he says, quote, "But we said we did not require dirges and lamentations and words. We do not. What then are dirges, modes of music? Tell me, for you are a musician." The mixed Lydian, he said, and the tense or higher Lydian in similar modes. These then, said I, we must do away with, for they are useless even to women who are to make the best of themselves, let alone to men. End quote. This belief in the underlying effect of music on the action of those who listen to it had a significant impact on Socrates and his belief in the role of music in society. The underlying effect of music is also discussed by Augustine in his book, The Confessions. In St. Augustine's Confessions, Augustine shows his apprehension towards music when he says, quote, "I used to be much more fascinated by the pleasures of sound than the pleasures of smell. I was enthralled by them. But you broke my bonds and set me free. I admit that I still find enjoyment in the music of hymns, which are alive with your praises, when I hear them sung by well-trained melodious voices. But I do not enjoy it so much that I cannot tear myself away. I can leave it when I wish. But if I'm not to turn a deaf ear to music, which is the setting for the words which give it life, I must allow it a position of some honor in my heart, and I find it difficult to assign it to its proper place. For sometimes I feel that I treat it with more honor than it deserves. I realize that when they are sung, these sacred words stir my mind to great religious fervor and kindle in me a more ardent form of piety than they would if they were not sung. And I also know that there are particular modes in song and in the voice corresponding to my various emotions and able to stimulate them because of some mysterious relationship between the two. End quote. Through this quote, it can be seen that, like Socrates, Augustine is aware of the power and effect is aware of the modes and effect it can have on the mind and soul. From Augustine's mind, the power of music is great and as such should be treated with great deference. Unlike Socrates, St. Augustine's goal when discussing music and what the effects of it are to better the worship of God. For Augustine believed that the only reason God created man was to bring glory to himself. However, after the fall, humans started to lose focus and shifted from glorifying God to glorifying themselves. Augustine believed that the use of a musical instrument or the act of singing would not be conducive to worshiping God rightly, but instead, St. Augustine was an advocate for the use of the Gregorian chant. The Gregorian chant is a kind of worship that was made the official method of worship in the Catholic Church by Pope Gregory I. The Gregorian chant is not like most forms of worship, for it does not have any musical accompaniment, and is merely a rhythmic chant led by the priest. One of the reasons that St. Augustine is against the use of beautiful music during a worship service, for he is worried that the use of beautiful singing could lead people away from the Lord. For before St. Augustine came to the Lord, music was one of the things that St. Augustine considered to be a great joy in life. And he's worried that if there is beauty in the music that is played during the worship of God, that we will be distracted from the worship of God and begin to focus on the pleasure that we are deriving from listening to the music. St. Augustine shows his belief in the merits of both the Gregorian chant and the effect of the musical modes through the statement from his book, The Confessions. Quote, "At other times, shunning over anxiously this very deception, I err into great strictness, and sometimes to that degree as to wish the whole melody of sweet music, which is used to David's Psalter, banished from my ear, and the churches too. And the mode seems to me safer, which I remember to have been told to me of Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, who made the reader of the psalm utter it with such slight inflection of the voice that it was nearer speaking than singing." End quote. St. Augustine was not trying to say that music was not enjoyable, for Augustine himself recognizes in his book the fact that music is pleasing, and that he greatly enjoys listening to music that is played well. However, St. Augustine is very much aware of the power of music over people, and because of this influence that music has, Augustine does not want to have the opportunity for there to be stumbling blocks in the church. For even when the message that is being proclaimed through the words is pure, and those who are singing do such an exemplary job of singing, that those who are listening are distracted from the music and brought to ponder the quality of the music, then the music has lost its purpose. Even though the Bible tells the believer to sing a joyful noise to the Lord, the purpose of that song is not to be eloquent, rather it is to bring the glory to God. Therefore, if the songs we are singing takes the focus from God and places it onto something else, it should be removed, lest it cause believers to stumble. St. Augustine made his position on the importance of the purity of worship when he said, quote, "Thus I fluctuate between the peril of pleasure and proved wholesomeness, inclined the rather, though not as pronounced an irrevocable opinion, to prove the use of the usage of singing in the church, that so be the delight of the ears. The weaker minds may rise to the feeling of devotion, yet when it befalls to me to be more moved with the voice than with the words sung, I confess to have sinned penally, and then have rather not hear the music." What St. Augustine is saying in this quote is that if he was sitting in a church and listening to the music, if what brings him to the point of adoration is the quality of how the music is sung, rather than the meaning behind the words, then the music has caused him to sin and he must repent. For those reasons, St. Augustine argues against the use of music in the church. Both St. Augustine and Socrates state their case about what should be the role of music in society. Socrates says that music will not be a part of his perfect city, for the effect that music could have on people of his city was not worth the risk. Socrates recognized that there is the possibility for music to do great good for his city, for he said, quote, "But it would seem that you have left the Dorian and Phrygian. I do not know the musical modes, I said, but leave us that mode that would fittingly imitate the utterances and accents of a brave man who's engaged in warfare or any enforced business," end quote. Through this statement, it is evident that music could be used to do some good in Socrates' system. However, Socrates did allow a musician to play an assortment of songs, that eventually there may come a time that a musician would try and stray from those boundaries. And that was not a risk that Socrates was willing to make. While Socrates saw the potential value of music in the construction of a city, St. Augustine saw a significant risk to the church. When St. Augustine looked at the purpose of music and worship, he did not consider music as beneficial to the goal of worship, that being the glorification of God. St. Augustine preferred the low monotone recitation of the Gregorian chant to that of the beautiful singing of others. The reason for this was that St. Augustine recognized that singing beautifully could cause those who were trying to worship from focusing on God, but instead the focus of the worship might shift towards how beautifully the people could sing. Both Socrates and St. Augustine share their apprehension about having music play a role in each of their societies. For Socrates, music could only hinder his society, for each mode of music has a different effect, and the only modes that created an acceptable response were the Dorian and the Ionian. Socrates, seeing that there was a host of unacceptable modes, contrasted with there being only two that are acceptable, which made the decision clear. Music was not to be a part of the city, for it hindered much more than it helped. St. Augustine was not trying to create a perfect city, but he was trying to find the purest way of worshiping. St. Augustine believed that the best way to go about making that happen was to eliminate the use of beautiful songs from the church services. In St. Augustine's mind, the use of beautiful music could cause people to stumble and focus on something other than God. Socrates and St. Augustine were two of the greatest minds ever to walk the face of the earth, and both of them came to the same conclusion, that the music you listen to can affect you in substantial ways. Music is an integral facet of human life. Through the course of human interaction, music is there. People form friendships, associate memories, and change views of other people based on the type of music they partake in. The effect of music is evident through our culture. The power of music can be seen in the types of music that are used in movies. Each type of scene can be identified by the soundtrack that plays. When the protagonist enters the graveyard, the eerie and high-pitched music plays. When a couple makes eye contact for the first time, the slow romantic beat rolls through. In the workplace, it is proper to abstain from slow or sad songs because it causes the worker to slow down. But instead, workers should listen to the soundtracks of achievement-based video games. The soundtracks to achievement-based video games is specifically designed to keep you engaged and desirous of achieving the next goal. That is why the belief that music is powerful and needs to be treated with respect must be upheld.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schnoebelen. If you give me a moment, I will begin. All right, thank you very much. I would like to begin by trying to develop an analogy that will allow us to talk about the question of the role of music in our lives. And not have to talk about music directly. And oftentimes when people talk about music, one of the standard go-to positions is that music is simply a source of pleasure, and it's an innocent pleasure. And therefore, no music is in any way detrimental to us because all it is just producing pleasure. And I was trying to think of an analogy, just think if we could talk about another form of pleasure to see if that similar situation applies. And talk about the pleasure of eating. Obviously, eating is a pleasure, and eating itself does not make us good or bad people. However, in the pleasure of eating, there is the obvious problem of taking the pleasure to the excess of its natural function, namely nutrition. And so if you take pleasure in eating and you eat more than you need to, you become unhealthy in your weight, and that's a problem. But and that's because the pleasure of eating is based on the pleasure of nutrition. There's a necessary connection to it. And so I was thinking, well, if we're going to compare music to another pleasure, we need to know what the particular good is that music is feeding in us. You have the pleasure of eating, the pleasure of sleeping, the pleasure of exercise. There's all sorts of different pleasures, and they all have a sort of good that they serve. And when they go beyond that good, that's when the pleasure becomes detrimental to us. And so I was thinking, in order to begin the discussion, it would seem that to develop that comparison, we need to figure out what is the particular good in our life that music serves. And so could you begin by addressing that question, explain what is the particular good in our life that music and its pleasure are attending to?
Music fosters certain types of action. When you listen to a lot of like football players will listen to music that hypes them up so that they go out and they don't fear the contact. Or when you're sitting down and you play a sad song, you're trying to express your emotion. So music can be used to express emotion, so it can be an outlet. That could be a particular good, but the one I see is the use of music in order to create in yourself the ability to go and do something.
Okay, so you'd say basically the point of music is motivation to human action.
Yes.
Okay. And, could you say a little bit more about how, pain can also be a motivator. I guess going back to the example of eating, if you're really hungry, you show up for dinner, all right? And so hunger is a motivator to the action of eating.
Yes.
And so would you say similarly, like if you're not doing enough, that music is the motivator that gets you to the point of being ready to perform human action?
Yes. Yes, I would.
Okay. I guess the question then comes up, is music always a motivator to action? Could you account for examples of music that seem to be more reflective? Oftentimes we have in music what are called a requiem, which is a piece written for a funeral. Mm-hmm. And you particularly like a state funeral or something like this, often a requiem will be composed. And you listen to that music, and would you say in that situation there's also a sort of action that the music is impelling you towards?
Yes. Sort of how when you're younger, you are doing something and you're listening to a song while you have a memory. So listening to that song later in life will bring back that memory, so that the action that is being brought forth by the music is a recollection of times past.
Okay.
So a requiem would be, if it's composed for a president in the past, listening to that requiem would foster the action of remembering the president.
Okay. So a requiem or that type of music is a motivator towards recollection and thinking upon the life of the person that is being remembered. All right. Well, coming back to the other examples, we're talking about the other examples of, sleep and eating, these other various human activities that have pleasure associated with them. Do you think music works similarly to the way they work? For example, if with drinking, the longer you go without drinking, the more intensely you feel the desire for drink. And the more you drink, the less that you desire to drink. And is music the same way, where if you don't do what it's trying to compel you to do, the longer you don't do things, the more you desire music. And then when you are filled with music, you kind of have a cessation of that desire for music.
I think it would be that if you're live on an island and you've never heard music, you're not going to have the desire. Well, you might have the desire to create a sound to entertain yourself, but you're not going to have the desire to go and listen to Mozart's sonata. But if you have listened to music your whole life, you will have the desire to go and listen to music. I believe so. Mm-hmm. But I believe that a better analogy is back to the eating. The more you partake in, you have to partake in the right stuff. If you only eat junk food, you're gonna be more bitter, more angry, and just a more surly person. But if you're eating healthily, then you'll be a happy, bright person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just got the next thing I'm going to go towards is asking about the cultivation of these particular pleasures. With eating, I think we understand that there are some people who, they just want to eat popcorn and hot dogs all day long, and they're usually about 8 years old, and they have a hard time getting beyond that. And you kind of grow up into a capacity to appreciate, different varieties and have a more refined palate, and yet sophisticated food and you might say simplistic food could both nourish you. I mean, it could be very simple food, very kind of straightforward, simple food that could give you the bodily nourishment that you need to fulfill the function of food. And yet there's this whole world of kind of the experience of eating that sometimes you kind of need to cultivate a taste for. How analogous would you say that is to the situation with music, where do you think there is kind of bare functional music that can do kind of what it's necessary to do for human functioning, and a broader musical palette that one could cultivate?
Yes. Someone who only partakes in one kind of music and never strays from that always is like a friend comes up like, hey, I like this song. No, it's not the right genre. Those people do exist, and within their one genre, they can get all the different types of music, and the ones that motivate, the ones that help you recollect, and the ones that are sad and help you express emotion. But I believe that it's better for everyone to have a broader, but you can have everything in one specific genre. You can.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a kind of a personal growth necessity of broadening your genre? I mean, I can imagine some people saying, I grew up in Mexico, I ate Mexican food, and that's what I'm going to eat all my life is Mexican food. Why do I need to, learn how to eat Japanese food? Why do I need to learn how to eat sushi? And saying I have no obligation to do that. Is having a narrow scope of taste and appreciation something that is a sort of misuse of human experience?
It can be, yes. If you're not willing to try something at least once, then you'll never know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Schnoebelen. We'll go ahead and open up to other questioners.
Rachel.
Hey, Vaughn, that was a great paper. Congratulations. I have two questions. The first question is that I was wondering, in the context of music today, do you think it's to our benefit or detriment that we primarily use the Ionian mode of music?
I think it's to our detriment because it spans everything, but it limits, it seems to limit the creativity within people, that they just stick to the Ionian major mode.
Okay, interesting. And then my second question is about Christians listening to music. And given that God created music, it's this beautiful thing that He's given us, wouldn't it be a better tribute to God to have a more ornate and complex piece of music than a very simple one?
Yes, it would. It would seem to be the better to bring glory to God, to use what He has given us to make these beautiful songs. But the fallen nature in us will say, "But I made this," and they will say, "I and me," and it will put the focus on themselves, and the people who are joining in will be focusing on what they are doing, not what God has done.
And would you say that's the fault of the people or of the music?
I'm saying that it's the fault of the people, but that the music can't help it.
Okay, so should Christians not listen to really beautiful music? Should they stick to more Gregorian chants type things so that they're not distracted from God?
No, but during the worship of God, I believe that it would be for the best to stick towards the more bass, not just Gregorian chant, but more bass music.
Why should the worship of God and then like their private lives be different in the music they listen to?
Because during the worship of God, the focus is supposed to be solely on God. Even though when we step outside the church, we are still children of God. The focus during our lives, we're supposed to be constantly in communication with God, but our focus of our life is to glorify God. But in that moment, our sole purpose is not to be bringing God praise. So in the outside, the music isn't supposed to be, the music's supposed to be clean and glorifying, but we're not in the act of praising.
So the church is kind of more directly to worship God,
yes.
And while we are glorifying God outside of church, it's not with the expressed intent to worship God.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, as you're saying, so Socrates, I guess, seems to think that we want to have sort of like warlike songs and things like that in order to sort of inspire our lawyer classes to go out and fight battles and football players to go out onto the field and play football well. And oftentimes, also, I think you expressed the opinion that we use music sort of as an outlet for our emotions, which is, oftentimes people think in like rock and metal and industrial and things like that. That is more of, like an expression of sort of that sort of negative emotions. And it, we see people like saying that, rock music has become too girly or things like that. But do you think that perhaps that actually sort of harder styles of music, they themselves need an outlet in society? Like if maybe like society that's not militaristic, should they not listen to the harder styles of things in order to not get random killer people? Because we often see rock music associated with school shooters and that sort of thing. So do you think that it's more so a outlet, or does it need an outlet itself?
So the people who are partaking in this might need like the punching bag so that they have a physical outlet along with their emotional outlet. I think that a lot of for the example of the school shooters, they need more help than more psychological help. But I think that the music itself, like hard rock music, could instill some of those tendencies, yes, and that it might be for the best of the people to limit themselves and or get a other physical outlet because they are not handled, that the music, for the action that the music is instilling within them, yes. Yes, ma'am.
What made you choose this topic?
Change I saw myself.
This is kind of based off of Rachel's question, but would you say that adding music to, let's say, the Gregorian chant could add greater power to the words that are being spoken? And if so, wouldn't adding music, like greater depths of music to worship, amplify the words and the passion that's being put forward?
Yes, I do. And Augustine said that if the music was, the beautiful music and the beautiful singing was great, but if what caused him to think upon the glory of God wasn't the meaning behind the words, but instead the beauty of the music and how it was being played, then that he views that as a sin, that isn't proper. But if the more beautiful the music, you can see how God is good. He made us to be able to create these beautiful sounds and create all this beauty, but that our fallen nature will take that beauty and will say, but it's me. It's me. They'll take it from the glory of God to the I did this.
So, like, the Gregorian chant would stop that from happening because it isn't allowing the distraction of music?
It's not allowing the distraction of music, and it's not something, you're not going to take credit for, like, a low monotone thing. You're not going to take credit for that. So it takes away, unless you, like, you're Pope Gregory and you're like, oh, I created the Gregorian chant. But if the people singing aren't going to be like, oh yes, I am great, it will be focusing on what God has done and the words that's being sung / spoken to God.
Thank you.
What's up, Josh?
Hello. I really enjoyed your paper. So my question is kind of like, so it seems like Socrates and Augustine were saying, music's kind of high risk, high reward kind of thing. So let's say I just really love country music. I'm just a huge fan of country music. I only listen to country music. I mean, so it seems like you're saying that it's good to kind of a broader kind of appreciation for different kinds of music.
Mm-hmm.
What's the good that you get from listening to other kinds of music? Like, I just really like country music. Why would I listen to anything else?
Well, in country music, you can get all the goods from all the music, but what I was responding to Mr. H, but if you don't broaden your palette and you don't broaden your music, you're not enjoying some of the better things in life. You're focusing on what you know. You're being safe. You're staying in your box instead of stepping out of the box with faith and listening to other music. Because you can get the sad songs, you can get the fight songs, you can get the recollective songs in every genre of music. But if you don't step out, then you're only sitting in your box and being like a hermit.
Okay, so you'd say that it's kind of just to appreciate God's like power, kind of everything God's done for us, just like stepping outside into nature kind of does the same thing. So why wouldn't we also do that in church? Like, why would we only listen to like Gregorian chants? Because that seems to be pretty safe, just kind of in a box.
The over-beautification of music isn't necessary. Well, I guess it's not over-beautification of music. Sorry, Augustine finds over-beautification of music. But the beautification of music in the church can do a lot of good. But if you're within a group of very strong believers who know that's what I got, but if, Paul says that if we do something that causes one man to stumble, it would be better. You would, I don't exactly remember, but we don't want to cause other people to stumble. So if we have new believers in there, then if we have the over-beautification of music, it could lead to them sinning.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I have a question.
What's up, Mother?
So I've heard at times people very much criticize Christian rock kind of for what you're talking about, that maybe it would cause people to stumble because it makes it sound like other music that isn't very good for you, causes other emotions, but it has similar sounds, and just because the words are different. Did you think about things like that? Like, how does that apply?
That is because a lot of Christian rock songs, most songs are created with the major, and there are only so many different ways you can put together something that sounds good and can be played well and played to a certain beat. So that the meaning behind it, as long as we focus on the meaning behind the words, I don't think that having a similar bass line for a Chris Rice song, I guess or a Christian rock song, as compared to a like a Justin Bieber song. The bass lines aren't what we're supposed to be focusing on in the church. It's not the big thing. Both bass lines may draw out the same emotion, but the focus of that emotion is different.
It makes me think of a book that I've just been made aware of, that I wish I told you about, called Why Should the Devil Have All the Good Music? And maybe if you want to pursue this, you can read that.
We have another Schnoebelen who'd like to get in on this discussion, and Mrs. Striplin, would you like to go ahead? I think I have things working here, so go ahead, and we'd like to hear your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. We've been talking a lot about Augustine, but going back to Socrates and his ideal city-state, if you were to have your own city-state that you could control, how would you moderate the music that was allowed to be played? Do you think there's merit in what Socrates was talking about, and what would you do?
I think there's merit in what Socrates is talking about, but I think it's a fruitless endeavor. Because people will find ways to play the music. If you say if I were to say you cannot play rock, and then I turn my back, that makes everyone else want to listen to rock. So the more you try to limit it, the more it'll be played. The more people will want it. So the less, if you let them go and you say, I think you should, this is what we want to do, at least in the church, then you're trying to foster focus in the church, focus on God, and not trying to quash other types of music, because then you will just create desire for that type of music.
But do you think if you were able to control the music that was played, you could make for better citizens?
If you were truly able to control the music that was being played, then yes, you would. By controlling the music, by moderating the music that is being played within your city, you could create better citizens. I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Striplin. I'd like to follow up on just opening the discussion to the possibility of music that is really not intending to influence human emotions in any way. The most adamant example of music that really seems to be about affecting the human emotions is Wagner. And if you listen to a 3.5-hour Wagner opera, you feel like your emotions have been put through an emotional blender and dragged all around the neighborhood. It seems to be very much what it's about. It's just kind of working up those feelings. Other music, let's take Bach's 2- and 3-part inventions. It's almost kind of like a Sudoku puzzle or a mathematical exercise where he takes one theme and he plays it, and then he puts it upside down, then he puts it against another version of itself in a fugue, and you get this music that is almost like a puzzle. Rather, and when you listen to the music too, you say, well, what sound is this music? And you listen to it and you say, I can't identify any particular human emotion that would seem to be kind of attached to or inclined towards. And so, one term that I've heard used as a way of describing that sort of music is absolute music. Music that is kind of for its own shape, not for really directing the human passions in a way. And it's, you know, you might say, well, what passion does it inspire within you? Well, it almost might be the same passion that you have when you're solving a Rubik's Cube. I mean, solving a Rubik's Cube, what human passion does that inspire? And it's not kind of the same thing. It's just kind of as a sort of a mental exercise. I mean, what would you say to the possibility of that function in music, that music is really more kind of like a puzzle?
A puzzle is used to make you think, make you figure it out. So the mathematical structure of those Bach pieces of music might be to guess I don't know, but I think that might be used to foster within you the desire to figure things out. To why. What is different about each part, and then you figure out, oh, he just played one line, flipped it, and then he played it against itself. And so it's to foster thought, maybe. That would be my explanation of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions?
Okay.
If music has that tendency to distract us from God, would you support then removing all music from church as a distraction from our focus on God?
No, because God does say to bring a joyful noise to the Lord. I do believe that it shouldn't be the great crescendo. We can still have the acoustic guitar and the drums, but it shouldn't be like the 8-piece orchestra. Because then you might start thinking, oh, what instrument is that, instead of thinking about God.
So you think it should be limited and not our sole focus in church?
Yes.
What do you say to like an opposite belief that like bad music in a church would subtract from the experience of worshiping God? Like if you're just listening to Gregorian chants and it's really not anything or have any effect on your soul or whatever, and it doesn't have any emotional value, and you're just not connecting with God, like, how would that affect a church? What would you say to that?
I would the focus of the worship of God should not be on the quality of music, but if, say, you're having a really bad day and you just can't get into it, but then in church, there's some really great playing that day, and you get all into, yes, God's here today. That I believe that can happen, but the limiting of music is to limit the possibility for the weaker believers to stumble upon it. The greater, the more eloquent the music definitely can bring you to the worship of God. But the point of limiting music is to limit the possibility for stumbling blocks.
Other questions?
I got one, although I'm going to try to put this, I'm still formulating it, but basically it's like, say you have 3 categories of Christians or believers. You've got those that think it's safest to just worship in the heart with no sounds whatsoever. And then you've got those who believe in singing, but they may not necessarily believe in using instruments for music or that kind of thing. And then you've got those that do use instruments and have singing and all that. If either of the 2 later categories believe that they are justified in their position, do you think it is their duty to kind of, in a spirit of gentleness, disturb the practices, or provoke to thought the practices of those who don't use any music whatsoever?
To come alongside the other believer and say, hey, why don't we try music today, or something like that?
Right.
Yes, I think that would be proper, because God does say to bring a joyful noise and a song to God, not just to worship Him in your own body, but to sing it out with other believers. So I believe that you shouldn't say, hey, we're singing today. You should say, why don't we? Or bring up a question to those in order to provoke thought. Yes, I think that is a proper response.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schnoebelen. We're going to take a short break. I'm going to make sure the porta potty goes in its right place, and we'll get right back to it.